Hey everyone, I'm here today to tell you how we can make America healthy again. And the first thing you need to do is get one of these hats, and we need everybody walking around and wearing it everywhere they go. But that's not going to be nearly enough. That's why I'm partnering with President Donald Trump to transform our nation's food, fitness, air, water, soil, and medicine. Our big priority will be to clean up the public health agencies like CDC, NIH, FDA, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Those agencies have become sock puppets for the industries that they're supposed to regulate. President Trump and I are going to replace the corrupt industry-captured officials with honest public servants. We're going to steer resources to meet our nation's biggest health challenge, chronic disease. We're going to identify its root cause, and we're going to eliminate those exposures. We're going to get toxic additives and pesticide residues out of our food. We're going to support the tens of millions of Americans who choose alternative and complementary medicine. We're going to become, once again, the healthiest nation on earth. That's what we mean by MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. If you want to support this vision, you can buy MAHA merch or donate to our website at mahanow.org.
Make America healthy again.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am very excited to welcome you to today's micro journey, taking place in the form of a roundtable discussion. We'll be tackling the question many in the so-called medical freedom movement are struggling with. Should the movement support Donald Trump and his Make America Healthy Again, or MAHA, coalition? After Robert F. Kennedy Jr. suspended his independent campaign for president and endorsed Donald Trump, many in the movement that Kennedy helps lead have been searching for a path forward. Many of those who formally or informally supported Kennedy have legitimate concerns over whether the issues on which he based his platform will now fall by the wayside. Will Donald Trump keep his promises to empower Kennedy to address America's chronic disease epidemic? Will he acknowledge his role in the COVID-19 crisis and begin to take corrective action? Will he finally drain the swamp and clean house of undue corporate influence over public health and other government systems? These are just some of the questions that we will seek to answer in today's micro journey roundtable discussion. My name is Liam Sturgess, and I will be your host for today. I'm a musician and writer, investigator, based in Vancouver, Canada. And I absolutely love learning more about how our world works, one micro journey at a time. I have the distinct pleasure of being joined today by three distinguished members of what is frequently called the medical freedom movement. Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, who will be joining us in just a little bit, Michael Kane, and John Gilmore. Thank you all for joining me today. And if I'm not mistaken, it looks like Dr. Bowden might be ready as well. So I'm going to bring her in.
Great.
Okay.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us.
Why don't we get started by briefly introducing ourselves to the audience, many of whom will know who all of you are, some of whom may be meeting you for the first time. So maybe offer a few words, again, who you are and what your role is in the medical freedom movement. Michael, why don't you get us started?
Thanks, Liam. Thanks so much for hosting this today. My name is Michael Kane. I was a New York City special education teacher for over 14 years. I was fired for declining the COVID shot. I am suing New York City in state and federal court thanks to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Children's Health Defense when Bobby was the chair of Children's Health Defense. He's now the chair on leave. He helped greenlight those and make those happen. And I've been battling in the streets of New York City, the streets of Albany, the state houses, in the courtrooms. And we have a real amazing movement here in New York. And the way I actually got started in this was in 2019. The religious exemption to vaccination for children was repealed in New York State. And I started following a man named John Gilmore, who's been doing this for a very, very long time and got me politically active. And at that point, I was just a citizen following John, who was an established leader in the movement. But then they came after me as well too. Then it wasn't, then it wasn't just theoretical about what might happen to me. No, they came directly after me very shortly after that. And John has been one of my mentors and continues to be.
Well, why don't we use that as an opportunity to invite John to introduce himself?
Michael, you're very kind. I've been involved in the medical freedom movement for about, I'd say, 23 years. It all started when my younger son, Luke, suffered a series of vaccine injuries in his first year of life. Every time he got around to vaccines, we saw distinct changes in his physical and developmental health and progress. And after about a year, it just became really evident that something was seriously wrong. He developed, sort of the classic symptoms of autism, which I think autism is a very complicated and controversial thing. From my perspective, autism is basically a label that's placed on a wide range of neurological injuries that people sustained. And that kind of got me on this journey. Back then, one of the main focus of at least the vaccine medical freedom movement at that time was to try and get mercury out of vaccines. This is something that Bobby Kennedy was also very heavily involved in. And we got it banned in about 8 states, New York being one of them. And as a result of that, I've just been sort of doing this work related both to autism, developmental disabilities, and also vaccine issues. And I'm really big on collaborating with other organizations and people in different movements and so on. And over the years, I got to know Bobby working on a variety of different projects. And we can talk more about that a little bit later. But as process of doing that, I developed a very high level of regard for him. A little bit later, I got to know Michael, as he said, through the fight in New York to protect the religious exemption. CHD was very much involved in that, Children's Health Defense. That led to creating the first state chapter of Children's Health Defense here in New York, which we did a lot of work through here. And it also led to eventually, I got together with some other people a couple of years ago and formed a super PAC and a PAC specifically to work on medical freedom issues. And that evolved into American Values 2024, which is the super PAC that's been exclusively backing Bobby. There's others, but I think we're by far the largest and most active. And I'm just really interested to see what happens here with this election. We can talk a little bit more later.
Yeah, as are we all, John. Now, finally, Dr. Bowden, tell us your very interesting role and story in the medical freedom movement.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, I'm sort of a newbie compared to Michael and John on this front. I was in the traditional system. I took some time off from practicing medicine to raise my boys. And when I decided to come back, I decided I would do it. I call it third party free. So I don't contract with insurance companies, hospitals, or the government. And I say, I only work for my patients. And that served me very well during the pandemic. And I started my current practice 6 months before COVID started. But being independent allowed me to treat patients the way I wanted to. And that caught the attention of people that didn't like that, and they tried to cancel me. So I had privileges at Houston Methodist Hospital, which was the first hospital in the country to mandate the COVID shots. They did it 5 months before Biden. So they announced that April 1st, and Biden was not till September. And I started speaking out about mandates on social media, and I stepped on their toes, and they tried to, just really destroy my life. They went to the press to announce my suspension, and they announced on Twitter that I was spreading dangerous misinformation, and that just really changed my world in a second. But I fought back, and I ended up suing the FDA because the FDA put out a lot of misinformation on their website and on social media. We all know the horse tweet, and we sued them over the horse tweet, basically, and we won. So the FDA had to take down their misinformation, And, it seems like a little thing, but it sets a precedent and it puts a permanent stain on the reputation. I also started a nonprofit called Americans for Health Freedom. And our goal is to get politicians to simply state that the COVID shot should be pulled off the market and also pledge not to take donations from big pharma. So started that nonprofit in November of last year. We're now up to almost 300 on the list. We have Thomas Massey, we have Marjorie Taylor Greene, we have Ron Johnson, we have the Surgeon General of Florida, Dr. Joseph Ladapo. But we also have, the smaller people. We have council members and precinct chairs, and so it's a wide range of power positions. And I strongly believe that, we may not be able to change Trump's mind. So we have to work at the lower levels and really get people in office that care. And the people on my list are warriors. I mean, they don't have to be convinced. You should see the messages I get from them when they sign up. I mean, they are on fire. So I really hope people will. Yeah, I don't know what we can do about Trump, but I think we can work in other ways to get our mission accomplished.
Absolutely fantastic. And just want to shout out Welcome the Eagle, who is very excited that you're here, Dr. Bowden, as well as Michael and John. I believe you met Albert at the recent Harlem rally.
Oh, very
and
cool.
yeah. And thank you to everyone who's joined us. I'm very happy to see there's so many people enthusiastic about this question and this set of questions we're going to try to answer. What strikes me about all of us is it seems we did not begin as politically active people, at least to the extent that that was our primary method of seeking change. Activists, maybe, maybe not even activists. And yet over the past couple of years, especially during the COVID era, so many things have become clear. For the first time, Americans and really citizens of the world discovered the extent to which their federal governments and governments at all levels can interrupt their life or stop their life or change their lives in fundamental ways on a whim because they think it's a good idea. And I'm very excited that Michael invited me to host this discussion because I think the topic is a question we're all legitimately seeking an answer to. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. stepped up as a non-politician, ironically, as it is, given his name is Kennedy, to champion and to create a political platform based on these issues that we've each come to become champions for in our own ways. And inevitably, it was disappointing when he suspended his campaign. But at the same time, if you take Bobby at his word, he legitimately seems to think that Trump in this election cycle will keep promises that have been made to him. And so I want to open it up first. Michael, tell us why you wanted to have this discussion today. What are the things that you think we need to start to answer before we can move forward in whatever this new paradigm is?
Well, the first thing I want to say is Kamala Harris is a non-starter. There's no way my organization, people that follow me are endorsing her. So this has nothing to do with that. I also want to say I have full faith and trust in Bobby Kennedy. I followed him for 16 years. He has lost money, prestige, relationships with families to do what's right. And when he said he woke up every day and prayed that he could do something to end the chronic disease epidemic in this country, I don't believe that was hyperbole. I believe literally the man has been doing that. So that's the first thing I want to start with. But where this really kicked off for me is the organization that I helped to found, Teachers for Choice. We fully endorsed Bobby Kennedy over a year ago. It was like real easy steering committee meeting. We were all like, yes, we are in. It's still up on our website at teachersforchoice.org as we fully endorsed him. When Bobby changed path, we got together as a steering committee and we couldn't come up with an answer. Everybody had a different position. Let's endorse him fully. Let's endorse him with reservation. Let's endorse him only in the states where Bobby isn't on the ballot and everything else. So normally as an organization, we've really been able to come to decisions. As an association, we do endorsements quite a bit. And this one really kind of stumped us. And then at the same time, right as I had that meeting, the very next day, John Gilmore put out an email that he blasted to his very large email list that said, Donald Trump, convince us. And I was like, yeah, that's like exactly where I'm at. Trump has said some great things. I am encouraged by a lot of it. But I'm going to bring up 2 points that have really, I've been like, wait, why has this not happened? That if I saw that could really make me as an individual change my tune. I'll see if it convinces the steering committee. But one is on Donald Trump's website, on his platform, he has 20 promises to the American people to make America great again. There's 20 promises. Medical freedom's not mentioned. MAHA, the Make America Healthy Again, is not mentioned. Health freedom, none of those words are mentioned there. And actually, I think you're at his website. If you click on platform, you will actually see these 20 promises. I don't understand why there's not a 21st promise. 21st promise to make America healthy again, taking on the corruption at FDA, CDC, NIH with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, to his credit, Trump has said that. He said that in a couple of speeches. That's fantastic. That's very encouraging. Why not put it in black and white or blue and white, whatever his color scheme is there on the website? Because listen, in political circles, this means something. Documenting and putting what your promise is on your official platform, it's not a meaningless thing. Some people are telling me I'm being silly, that MAHA can't take over MAGA. That's not what I just want the 21st promise. I don't want all the promises. Add it into, and I want to say this, the MAGA base out there has been great. Like I actually went to a Trump rally for the first time in Long Island. They're almost like, hey, where have you guys been? Thanks so much for showing up. They really love it. And that's a very positive sign at the grassroots. But this is such a simple ask. I don't understand why this can't happen, just like that. And I'll leave it at that and pass it along to hear what other people have to say.
Well, I'll say, it's difficult to criticize Trump and not get severe backlash. And I think that's part of the problem. I mean, I'm definitely voting for Trump. I do not want Kamala to win, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stay quiet and let him off the hook. And I think that's where we are, is that, no one wants to offend Trump. The biggest mistake he made was Operation Warp Speed. And people are scared. His base doesn't want to rock the boat. So, I mean, maybe once he gets elected and everything's secure, then people will really start, his base will really start speaking out. But it's offensive because COVID affected every single voter in America. It's the one issue that directly impacted all of us, and we cannot let them stay silent on it.
Yeah, and I just want to say, as a Canadian, I can tell you what the United States does, the rest of the world does, at least the rest of the Western world. And so, this is not an issue that can be let go lightly. Right. John, it looked like you were about to jump in.
Sure. Now, I have a great deal of confidence in Bobby. I mean, I just spent the last 18 months trying to get an elected president. I do not have a great deal of confidence in Trump. Okay. It's not as if he has no track record on this issue. And let me also sort of say, before I start talking about Trump, I think Kamala Harris is not an option. Okay. Right. She's would be a unmitigated disaster. And I also want to preface this by saying I'm primarily a one-issue voter. Okay. Like some people only vote about guns, some people only vote about abortion. I vote about medical freedom issues. And Donald Trump has a troubling track record. Okay, back in 2016, when he first ran, he met with a lot of prominent people in the medical freedom movement. He made a lot of promises. He made public statements. And he even said that he was going to have Bobby Kennedy run a federal vaccine safety commission, right? And he got inaugurated, and that all just sort of disappeared, all right? basically through none of that came through, and he did nothing at all to further vaccine safety and vaccine rights issues in his first administration, or his term, I should say. And then COVID came along, and I think his performance during COVID was absolutely disastrous. I guess we can't really get into it, but maybe basically every aspect of the COVID program that you can think of, the federal government lied to us about it. He didn't really do anything to sort of help people refuse the shot once it became available before he was out of office. And it's really troubling that he still, until fairly recently, he was talking about his performance during COVID and expecting applause, right, at his rallies and so on. And after a while, people started booing about it, and he stopped talking about it. But just as recently as last week, he was in an interview with Cheryl Atkinson, and he was talking about how people were being unfair to him because he did so wonderfully during COVID and did a fabulous job getting people ventilators. And Dr. Bowden could probably speak to this, but I think the fatality rate of people put on ventilators was over 90%, right? And he wants praise for that. Not only that, fairly recently, he was creating a lot of excitement in medical freedom circles by saying that he was against mandates, okay? Yes. Just mandates. I won't going to give a dime to any school that has mandates. And he was saying that for weeks. And then eventually one of his staffers said, well, he's talking about COVID mandates, not other mandates, right? So, he does not have a good track record, especially when you consider that if he wins, he's got, this entire public health infrastructure, this, $1 trillion industries that are going to be opposing everything that he wants. He says he wants Bobby Kennedy to do, right? That's a problem. So I need to see a lot more from him to be enthusiastic. Let's put it that way, right?
Yeah, John, on the note of powerful industry players opposing whatever his agenda may be, and on the note of that vaccine safety commission that never came about, I've pulled up a clip of a very interesting individual explaining what happened to that. If you guys don't mind, I play it for a moment.
Sure.
Then the second time I saw him was the March after that, so March 2017 in the White House. In both of those two meetings, he asked me if vaccines weren't a bad thing, because he was considering a commission to look into ill effects of vaccines. And somebody, his name is Robert Kennedy Jr., was advising him that vaccines were causing bad things. And I said, no, that's a dead end. That would be a bad thing. Don't do that.
Now, Bill Gates may or may not be correct on that. We each have our perspective, but I think we can all agree Bill Gates should not have that level of influence on that particular issue in the White House. And as we've kind of all alluded to already, there was an opportunity already. President Trump was in office, and I don't know if anybody would confidently say he drained the swamp, Bill Gates being part of that swamp.
Sure.
So Liam, I'd like to, some things I want to say on that. I do appreciate that Donald Trump's in a tough spot. Donald Trump has a lot of big pharma industries that like him, that like Operation Warp Speed, that likes what happened there. He has Susie Wiles at the top of his campaign. Susie Wiles is the co-chair of Mercury LLC. It's one of the biggest PR firms representing big pharma, representing Pfizer, representing Gilead, representing many of these companies. And she is a power player, and she is a power broker out there at the top of his campaign. Now here he brings Bobby Kennedy in, right? Talking all this MAHA stuff. So there is clearly this contradiction and this problem. And look, welcome to politics, though. I'm not even saying this to slam Donald Trump. I'm saying this, let's be eyes wide open. Let's be real. This is what's happening right now, and where he is balancing between how much do I go in that direction? how much funding am I going to lose if I go in that direction? To what, Dr. Bowden, you want to speak?
I mean, that's why we love Trump, right? He can't be bought. So they think, so they say, right? So he's fearless, but he can't talk about this shot, right? As you notice during the Cheryl Atkinson thing, he's like, well, I'm not going to talk about it. I mean, why does he shy away from this one topic? He is fearless, and supposedly he can't be bought. So step up, Donald Trump, and do the right thing.
You know, I kind of disagree with you, Dr. Bowden. I think he is fearful of some people, right? He really kind of got rolled in 2020 by his own appointees and the deep state and public health, you know. And but I'm not saying that he couldn't do a lot better. I think what he has to do is be very specific. I mean, Donald Trump is not good about specifics, right? He's good at sort of sweeping generalities and inspiring people and so on and so forth. But we need to know really specific things. Now Bobby Kennedy is saying very specific things. Okay. Yes, but Bobby Kennedy is just a person who is supporting Trump at this point. He's not Trump. We got to hear it from Trump. And we got to hear it from Donald Trump, not Donald Trump Jr., okay? Not Eric Trump. You know, it's got to be from the guy who's going to be in the Oval Office.
John, I want to just add to that. You know, Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump Jr. are collaborating a lot. You're seeing social media posts come out from them. They had an excellent editorial in The Hill. They recently did a podcast together. These are great things. These are great signs. And we shouldn't just say like, that's meaningless. It's meaningful. It certainly is. But it's Donald Trump Jr., meaning by definition, a man who will not be the president, no matter what happens. We're at the point we have two choices. That's the reality. It's an unfortunate reality. We fought to have third parties get in there. Weren't able to do that. We have these two choices, and Donald Trump will be the big guy. Ultimately, we need to hear, and we've heard some great stuff from him, and I appreciate it. We've heard way better stuff from him than from Kamala Harris. And I want to point out another point in Trump's favor here. There's no way Anthony Fauci is playing a role in his administration coming up. What Bobby Kennedy was able to do with his book, what our movement was able to do, the awareness that was raised, Congress getting flipped, having a Republican Congress that then held Anthony Fauci accountable, Andrew Cuomo and others, has really changed the tide and has really given, I mean, if Kamala Harris wins, Fauci might come back, come out of retirement. That's what we're talking about there. But you're right. You know, this is the last major point I want to see from Trump. This could really do a lot for me. Bobby Kennedy has said day one, we're declaring a public health emergency to end the chronic disease epidemic. Boom. That's the most exciting thing I've heard in this entire presidential cycle. And shout out to Bobby for saying it. It's just an absolutely amazing promise. But he can't do that. Only Trump can do that. If Trump were to come out and to say, yes, Bobby's correct, I'm going to do that, whoa, that goes a real long way for me. The fact that Trump doesn't say that actually speaks very loudly to me as well, too, and feeds into my doubts and some of my followers' doubts as well.
Now, I want to circle back to the public health emergency point if we have time. But first, I want to bring up contrasting perspectives from members of my audience. So we've got this excellent comment from Wolf Relius, who says RFK Jr. is the wedge to push more tangible action on medical freedom. So where he goes in this presidential election, so too goes his influence. On the other hand, a gentleman named Michael Ginsberg, when I pushed out the announcement of this discussion yesterday, he offered his own take. Should the medical freedom movement support Donald Trump? He says no, and there is no movement. That model doesn't work. It never has. And, I offered for him to come and repeat the comment in the chat, but he's in Australia, so I don't think he's here. But, he presented a bit of a challenge, in particular to you, Michael. He says, Michael's clearly a big believer in the movement, so it would be good if I could challenge you on why you still feel that way given the current track record. Now, I'm not sure what he means by current track record, but I do understand challenging the premise that there is one movement. And I can share, I just got back from Denver, Colorado, from the Independent National Convention, where a lady from the Forward Party made this same point in terms of political independence and the label of populism. She rejected the idea that all political independents are populist. And I see sort of a similar logic to this challenge. What does it even mean to be part of the medical freedom movement? And is that what we're dealing with when we talk about Bobby Kennedy and the MAHA alliance with Trump?
Oh, I think for sure it's at least a portion of it. I could give you direct evidence of what the movement was. In 2019, we were up in Albany fighting to stop the repeal of the religious exemption of vaccination for kids. We got 2,000 people up there. We failed. Then you go to 2022, January 5th, 2022, we were back in Albany with 4,000 people. When Kathy Hochul said they were going to mandate COVID shots for kids, we're going to get it done, she said. She didn't, because we had 4,000 people out there, and she was like, whoa. And then just a couple weeks later, we had 40,000 people at Defeat the Mandates in Washington, D.C., and then just shortly after that, we had 1 million people in your country, Liam, in the Capitol, in Ottawa, on the trucker convoy. That is direct evidence of what the medical freedom movement is. It's not a monolith. I don't mean that, of course. It's not a monolith. There are many. I'd say half of Teachers for Choice supporters are all in MAGA, all in Donald Trump. They're in. But then there's the other half that are saying, I don't know. And that's why this conversation is so important. We can't. I think these people that are weighing, what do I do? Do I vote third party? Do I vote Jill Stein? Do I vote libertarian? Do I sit this out? Yada, yada. That's going on. This could represent like 5 millions of votes, 5-6 million votes. You can't have that right now. So this conversation is about making sure people are heard. When people are just saying fall in line, like the medical freedom people are some of the most independent thinkers on the planet. We need to respect that. I know Bobby Kennedy respects that. So this conversation is about making sure people are heard and that their agendas are here. And yes, there certainly is a medical freedom movement. It's just not a monolith.
Well said. John, Mary, do you have anything you want to add to that point before we move on?
Yeah, I just kind of getting back to my single issue focus. One of the things that I basically wrote my position, as Michael said, in this article called "Donald Trump Convince Us." It's on the website of my organization, Autism Action Network, if you want to read it. And I brought up 2 points that I think are absolutely crucial. Trump and Bobby have been talking a lot about what needs to be fixed at the various agencies and so on. We need to get corrupt individuals out of there and systems and so on, which is true. That has to be done. But I think what we really have to do is really rethink how public health is being done in the United States, right? Particularly when it comes to vaccine policy. And what I would really like to hear Donald Trump say, it's good to hear Bobby say it, but I want to hear Donald Trump say it, is there's 2 changes we really have to see. One is that the day of the vaccine mandate is over. Okay, that's a 19th century idea that no longer works. One of the things that COVID showed us is that we cannot trust the public health institutions to make wise decisions about those type of things, right? It's up to them to convince us that we want to get a shot. It's up to them to convince us that we want to give our child a shot, okay? The mandate as an idea has to go. The second thing is that vaccines are the only product that if you are injured by it, you cannot sue the manufacturer of the product or of the person who gave it to you. Okay. Essentially, what they did in 1986 is they passed a bill that took away our 7th Amendment right to go to court. Right. That has to be restored. Right. The 1986 Act that took away our legal rights has actually been a disaster. Right. We cannot. All the sort of legal systems that we use, subpoenas, discovery, that are used to try cases related to injuries, say, caused by medicines, do not apply at all with vaccines, right? And the only way you win a case, against a dangerous medicine is with that. You got to get the information, the documents, all the things that courts are set up to provide. We see none of that with vaccines. Okay. They have no liability whatsoever. And if you have no liability whatsoever, what incentive do vaccine manufacturers and other institutions have to make anything better? So I think the two key things, the two fundamental changes have to be end mandates. We get to go back to court just like the Seventh Amendment says that we do. If Donald Trump said that, I would be his biggest cheerleader you could possibly find.
But I just want to say, I think there's a large untapped group of people out there that are scared to speak out against Trump. So I would encourage everybody to, you can speak out against this COVID issue and still support Trump. And yeah, I've had people warn me, like, don't talk bad about Donald Trump because you're going to lose followers. You're going to lose influence if you speak out about Donald Trump. And that is ridiculous. And, a vote for Donald Trump is not just caving, right? It is, we cannot let Kamala get in office. I mean, that would be just a game over. We have to get Trump in office. There's just no other way about it. And then we have to work very hard, get his attention, and make sure we're yelling about this particular issue that it's so loud that he cannot ignore it. But right now he's allowed to ignore it because the MAGA base doesn't want to criticize anything he does or allow anybody else to criticize him.
Well, I want to, during the midterm election 2 years ago, was the very first time I voted Republican. I'm a union delegate, labor family in New York my whole life. And, things just got really bad with the Democrats and what they were doing. And me and John as well, too, talked to Lee Zeldin. He got on a Zoom with us. He did 90 minutes, went over all of our issues. And then we pushed him to make public statements. And he did, and we continued to push him. People still didn't think it was good enough. And eventually at teachersforchoice.org, I documented 24 times Lee Zeldin's on the record, speeches, tweets, all of those things, and put them up and sent them out to everybody. And was like, look, the guy has really done quite a bit. Maybe he didn't say every single thing, but look at what he has done. And Lee Zeldin didn't win, but he did better than any Republican in New York State in decades. And that was a large part because he really not only spoke to our issues, he documented it. He put it down. He actually put his name to this. He didn't play footsie with it. He didn't have just his son saying it. He didn't say it in generalities and not put it on his campaign website. So that's the thing. And speaking about that, we can't have Kamala Harris. I totally understand that. But there's people out there that are jaded, that have been lied to before. And we need to energize those people. We need them to believe in this. And that's why all these things that John and I are talking about is so important, because that energy needs to be there to get. We're in New York. We get people to go out to Pennsylvania, right? That's one of the big states. John and I can do that and can push people and tell them to go there. But if they don't believe in it, they're not going to go. So That's why it's so important to see as many public signals documented from the big guy himself, from Donald Trump, as possible.
Yeah, and I just want to say, if you can't constructively criticize somebody, then what's the point? And call me naive. I think Trump has largely been reflective of his base, at least on average. And I think the idea that you should just shut up and take whatever Trump gives you is really. Think about that in the context of anyone in your life. Do you have somebody who your relationship with them is whatever they say goes? And if you object or criticize constructively or vocally disagree, that you're then somehow punished? That's called abuse. And so the question is that the situation we're in? And I'm not convinced we necessarily are, or if we are, it's surmountable.
And it's also self-induced, right? It's
yes.
People that are putting that on themselves or think that they need to maintain favor, by towing a line. That's just anti-American to me. That's not the American way, in my opinion. I think Dr. Bowden's totally right on this.
And perhaps Bobby is the perfect example of this. Bobby spent the entirety of his campaign until he suspended criticizing equally both Biden, Harris, and Trump. And what happened? Both platforms evolved, but the Trump campaign took his call. And in response to the aggressive constructive criticism, absorbed the platform, at least on paper. And so I think there you go. That's at least a good sign. Now, I want to circle back to the declaration of an emergency in regards to the chronic disease epidemic. Now, Michael, you sound excited about this. I've heard others who are deeply concerned about this simply because of what it is, which is the federal government invoking additional powers to accomplish ostensibly a very noble and important goal. I want to start with Dr. Bowden. As a medical doctor who experienced firsthand the kind of authority that the government invoked in controlling not only how medicine was done, but how medicine was talked about, both publicly and within, doctor to patient. I'm curious as to what your perspective is on the premise of declaring a public health emergency to deal with the chronic disease epidemic.
Well, my suspicion is that this is a diversion, that this is, I could be wrong, but the Bobby Kennedy is the biggest threat to big pharma that's ever existed. So if I were big pharma, I might try to divert everybody's attention to big ag. Maybe I would, throw the blame on our food supply. So, that's my big concern right now is that this, all this intense media that's going out against our food. And I agree that our food supply, we need to wake up. We have an epidemic of obesity in our country, and it certainly needs to be addressed. And I completely agree with the message. I am concerned about the timing and the intensity. Some of the people that were at Senator Ron Johnson's meeting have, if you dig into their connections, they are quite worrisome. So, that's my take on it. I could be wrong. I'm still sort of researching all this.
Dr. Bowden, I just want to say thank you for saying that. It's a hard thing to say. It's a bold thing to say. And it's good to put it out there as a thesis. It needs to be out there because we're dealing with one of the most deceptive and devious organizations, organized crime syndicates, I might say, in my opinion, when you're talking about big pharma. And if they could come from a way to protect themselves where you think they're actually attacking themselves, let's blame it all on red dye 40. And red dye 40 is horrible. I don't give it to my kids. My kids are not allowed to consume it. So right, it's a correct message, right? But the hiding a devious agenda behind the truth is something that we have to keep open, that idea might exist, because these are very, very smart, well-paid people in these positions that are playing a very interesting game of chess against the people. So thank you for being one of the only voices and a prominent voice that's willing to be brave enough to say, let's have that uncomfortable conversation as well too. Yeah.
And just before you jump in, John, I just want to add, this is something else that Michael Ginsberg pointed out in his criticism, is that on Bobby's new MAHA website, under the Reverse the Chronic Disease Epidemic tab, and I think across the website as a whole, it appears the word vaccine doesn't show up once. Now, in fairness, it does describe pharmaceutical drugs, which I think vaccines by definition are, pesticides, additives, environmental chemicals. So just to add that to the discussion, John, what's your take?
Well, I haven't seen the MAHA website, but if they don't mention vaccines, particularly given the last history of the the world since 2020, that's not good. And just what we were talking about earlier, we've got huge problems with our food supply and how it's produced and what's in it and so on. I think that's good. But I do think that potentially, particularly in the light of what you just said, it could possibly be sort of a diversion away from pharmaceuticals and particularly vaccines. which is another reason why I think Donald Trump really needs to speak clearly about what he wants to do. I mean, just because we want to hear more about what Trump believes and will do isn't necessarily a criticism. Okay, it isn't necessarily an endorsement of Harris, because we're not going to see any of this from Harris. But I think what the Trump organization has to realize is that people who are concerned about medical freedom will decide the outcome of this election. This is why Donald Trump moved to embrace Bobby in the first place. He's a very smart guy. He realizes that Bobby has a constituency of his own that Trump wasn't reaching, and he really needs to have that constituency if he's going to win this election. I mean, the last election, I believe, was decided by 60,000 votes in 3 states. And if you take a look at the polls, this one is probably going to be pretty close too, right? And the people who are concerned about these issues is enormous, all right? A poll recently came out from Gallup that showed that 56% of Republicans, for example, do not believe in vaccine mandates. It even showed that 25% of Democrats no longer support vaccine mandates.
And just to be clear, that means any vaccine mandate. That's not just COVID vaccine mandates.
That was not just COVID. That was all of them, right? And the issue for those people is not, are they going to vote for Harris or Trump? Is that, are they going to vote for Trump or stay home? Maybe some of them might vote for a third party, a libertarian. I'm not really sure. But what I think they really need to do is they need to get those people who may stay home an incentive not to stay home and get out and vote for him. And I think if Donald Trump does that, he will win this election. If he doesn't, he will lose.
Now, I just for the sake of making sure I'm, being accurate, and I absolutely never want to be unnecessarily overcritical just for the sake of being critical. The website, the issue that I was made aware of is specifically the word vaccine is not mentioned. But to be clear, big pharma's influence, pharmaceutical drugs, you look at the visuals, it's clearly a big part of it. So it seems, and as Mag Mama T says, the MAHA website does mention autism and vax concerns. It's deep on the page, but there.
Liam, I just want to add something to that is, I understand leaving out the vaccine part. When you have Bobby Kennedy's face there, Bobby Kennedy's face says vaccine, vaccine, vaccine.
Absolutely.
So I do get that. And again, this is a game of politics. Politics is the art of the possible, not the perfect. I'm not the guy saying Donald Trump needs to be perfect for me to get on board. That's not what it is. This is a complicated and nuanced thing. So I just want to.
Well, and you're speaking to what I was just thinking, which is the point is this is clearly, strategic decisions are being made to present these political messages.
But we don't want to get wedged out of those strategic decisions, because that's what happens. If you don't make enough noise and push your agenda enough, the strategy goes, woof, you're gone.
And that's what happened in 16. That's what happened in 20.
And so what I want to offer to the panel is, it's clear, and this really should be obvious, there is no hero or savior or solitary figure who's going to come in, whether it's in the White House or on TV, who's going to overnight solve everyone's problems. The role that Bobby Jr. chose to take on was one of a megaphone. And indeed, getting into the White House gives a lot of levers over the nation's, power decision making. But in the end, the biggest benefit has been getting these issues onto, mainstream political discussion and on television when he's not censored. But that only goes so far in terms of actually affecting the change that we're all ultimately advocating for. And so I'm wondering if each of you could speak to whether it's Donald Trump or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or in a worst case scenario that it's a Harris administration, what is the role of, each of us, our friends and colleagues, the general public, in actually effecting change, not only in our own lives, but ideally systematically?
If I could address that, this is something I think about quite a bit. I think what the role ordinary people or people who are in the movement can play, and outside of it as well, is that, even if Donald Trump gets elected and he fully embraces everything Bobby's talking about wants to do, they are going to have such massive, powerful resistance. They are going to need literally millions upon millions of tens of millions of people backing them up if they're going to achieve their agenda. We're going to have to put massive pressure on members of Congress, on members of the Senate, on the media, corporations, and so on, to compel them to do the right thing. And if Trump and Bobby, even if like with the best of intentions, if they don't have that, it's going to be very limited on what they can do. So it's absolutely crucial that they really capture and motivate the people who are inclined that way to follow along with them. And that's the only way they're going to accomplish anything.
You know, Biden and Harris spent $11.5 billion mobilizing influencers to brainwash us about the COVID shots. So we were up against an enormous force. And I just encourage everybody to money is less important than time, and contact your representatives, get on social media, make noise. And then also support my nonprofit, Americans for Health Freedom. Get your representatives to sign the pledge.
Yeah. And yeah, I agree with all of that. Do something. There's nothing to do. Follow John Gilmore, especially if you're in New York, autismactionnetwork.org. Follow Teachers for Choice, teachersforchoice.org, teachersforchoice.substack.org. We're on Twitter and stuff. And we're not just twiddling our thumbs. We had a rally in Harlem calling for an end of COVID shots on kids. We had over 100 people in the streets with African drummers chanting, "Hands off our children, stop the shots." We're mobilizing people around a ballot initiative that would take away parental rights in New York State. Prop 1, vote no on Prop 1 in New York State. We're all over the place on these things. We're at the State House. We're in the streets. We're at City Hall. I was on the steps of City Hall just a couple of days ago calling for an investigation into Dr. J. Varma, the Varmagate situation. That's New York City. That's us. We have 11 or 12 city council members that support us. There's no one answer here, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but follow those who are doing stuff. There are people. Dr. Bowden is amazing. She's doing stuff. John, Liam, myself, we're doing things. So follow along, because there's a lot of genuine grassroots effort and not everything we do works, right? I'm not trying to say I have all the answers. If you can invent something new, that's awesome. I love people trying to do that, but don't just sit around feeling like you're powerless, like your vote doesn't matter, like your time doesn't matter, like your voice doesn't matter. That's what the enemy wants. That's what they want you to think. And it is not true. I know it's not true, because I lost my job as a teacher and I've been fighting for years, and I've seen this country shift. I've seen it go from 70% supporting that I was a diseased mess and I should be fired, to now 70% are saying, did we get that right? Maybe we got that wrong. And that's because of our efforts. So get involved, stay involved, follow us, and do what you can, because what you do and what you say, it matters so much.
And if I could add to that, if you are a Donald Trump supporter, and if you are a Bobby Kennedy supporter and they win, if the Democrats control Congress, there's going to be very little they're going to be able to achieve.
That's right.
So, if you are going to vote for Trump, you got to vote Republican down the line, right?
That's right.
And I'm not a partisan guy. I'm a registered Democrat, right? But facts are facts. The Democrats do not embrace our issues, anything but. They're actively working against anything related to reform of public health, pharmaceuticals, and vaccine rights. And the Republicans, to a great extent, not completely, but to a great extent, support that. And it will be absolutely essential to have majorities in the Senate and the House come January of next year.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been an incredible discussion, and we've made almost perfect time. So I want to give you each one more opportunity to tell people exactly where they can go to find you, to support the work you're doing, whether political or not. And if you give a web address, I'll type it into the chat to make sure people have easy access to it. Mary, how about we start with you?
So americansforhealthfreedom.org, and send that to your representatives, or get on Twitter and publicly shame them. publicly pressure them to sign the pledge. And my Twitter is MD Breathe. Sorry, X.
Wonderful. Yeah, I still have a hard time switching over to referring to it as X. I don't know if I ever will personally. But how about you, John?
I can be reached at autismactionnetwork.org. It's also Autism Action Network on X/Twitter. You can reach me there. I just think I want to leave everybody with the idea that we've got 40 or so more days to try and extract as many concessions and promises and specific statements from the candidates about our issues. We need to maximize it so we can be a lot more confident and have a lot more company to vote with us come election day, or when we vote early.
Yeah, and I just want to say, John and I currently have worked out 3 questions we think you need to send to everyone seeking office that gets their yes/no answers. It's not even hard for the elected officials to do it. So watch at Autism Action Network, also at teachersforchoice.org, teachers.for-choice.org. Most of our stuff is on Substack now, so the .org will link you right over to the Substack. And on X, I am teacher_choice, or just search #teachersforchoice. It'll come up.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again so much. This has been a very enlightening discussion, one that I know I needed to have personally. And, I think we've come to some very reasonable conclusions, and we've certainly offered food for thought for this wonderful audience that has joined us. A lot of people over on Twitter/X, a lot of people on Rumble, and even some on YouTube, where we appear to still be live, which is
all right.
Quite an accomplishment these days.
Great.
So yes, thank you all. I will say ta-ta, Michael, John, Dr. Bowden, thank you very much again. And I hope we can do this again very soon.
Thank you so much.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this discussion today, I hope you'll stick around, go back and look at some of the micro journeys that I've done over the last year or so. I've also included links to prior discussions I had with my former co-host of the Rounding the Earth podcast, Matthew Crawford, where we discussed we had discussions with Michael Kane as well as with Dr. Bowden. And in that same episode, we talked to Dr. Brian Tyson. So go back through the comments if you want to watch those. I highly recommend it. And if you want to follow my work, subscribe to this channel, whether you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, or follow me on X. And most importantly, perhaps, visit me at liamsturgess.substack.com, where you can subscribe either for free and receive updates on my written work as I do it, as well as these discussions. You can also sign up to be a paid subscriber, which will help support my independent work, seeking to understand how our world works one micro journey at a time. Ladies and gentlemen, signing off.